Okay, so last time we finished with all the various places that it talks about prejudice in our big book. So we are on page 11 in the first paragraph. To Christ, and let's stop right there and talk about what that word means. It means the anointed one. And here is some information. The literal translation of the Hebrew word is anointed, of the word Messiah is anointed, which refers to a ritual, make or declare something sacred, dedicate formally to a religious or divine purpose, someone or something by putting holy oil upon it. The word appointed in the case of man answers to anointed in the case of Jesus. Therefore, the Christ, that is the anointed, is the title here given designedly. Okay. That's actually going to be a definition on the exercise on page 47. So to Christ I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teaching most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. So that's take what you want and leave the rest program. Now we're going to do a fun exercise, and we're going to replace the word Christ with AA. To AA, I conceded the certainty of a great program, not too closely followed by those who claimed it. Its moral teaching most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. So this is the take what you want and leave the rest program, which is highly encouraged, or at least it was when I was there. And now I'm going to ask you to go to page 58, which says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. So if we want what the first 100 men and women had, which was deep and effective spiritual experiences, we need to do what they did instead of take what you want and leave the rest. And we'll be reminded on page 72 of what our path is. Second sentence on page 72. We, excuse me, the first 100 men and women have been trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator and to discover the obstacles in our path. So new is something that did not exist before, which circles us back to the word prejudice that we reviewed last time, meaning that I need to face my old ideas. I need to get rid of them and have a new idea. I didn't want, okay, yeah, so this is just my personal thing. And I didn't want spirituality of any kind when I got here. I was an agnostic full of prejudice, but at the same time backed into a corner and had to look at Alcoholics Anonymous. So the wars which had been fought, the burnings and the chicanery that religious dispute had facilitated made me sick. I honestly doubted whether on balance the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I'd seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. The brotherhood of man a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed the boss universal, and he certainly had me. But my friend, the friend is Ebby, sat before me, and he made the point blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead. Suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Had this power originated in him? Obviously, it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me in that minute, and there was none at all. So that's the deal. God did it, period. And Ebby makes these points. His human will had failed. And when you study Varieties of Religious Experience by William James, you will see that the common denominator is self-surrender. He was pronounced incurable. Society was about to lock him up, and he admitted complete defeat. All right. So we want to ask ourselves, do we have this power? No. Does our sponsor have this power? No. All right. So we have a couple of things to look up here. Life has multiple definitions. Okay, so we're going to go over here. We will take a deep look when we review the definitions on page 47, which means that life is a lifespan or spiritual existence transcending to rise above or go above the limits of physical death. And also remember on page 8, the second paragraph describes our way of life. I was soon to be catapulted in what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. Okay, now let's talk about power. Page 43, the third paragraph. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being, such as your sponsor, can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. And I'm sure you all know what must means. Okay, top of page 85. We will react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We are neither fighting it nor are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we have been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We've not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. This is our experience so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. Okay, back to Ebby and Bill. So remember, Ebby has only 60 days sober while he is making this approach to Bill Wilson, who is still drinking. You know, and if you think about that, what do you think people might say about that this day and age? And do you hear about those things happening? So you can see how far removed we've gotten to what the first people did. That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which has done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past, which means looking back 2,000 years in biblical times. Never mind that. Right here, right now, said a miracle directly across the table, and he shouted great tidings. So great tidings means new information, right? So Ebby is bringing Bill new information. So Ebby, Mr. 60 Days Sober, is a miracle and a powerful demonstration to Bill Wilson, who later ended up being the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous and writing the textbook, which you and I are studying today. So it's very important to understand this, because after the 6 steps transformed to the 12 steps, there was something lost in that, meaning that the 12th step is the first time that it mentions working with others, and therefore people really delay getting started on this action. If you go back to what really happened early on and the first 6 steps, right? The 6th step was continued work with other alcoholics as if it's been happening the whole time. So I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly organized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped a new soil. Okay. So the frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices, must be grounded in a power greater than himself. This is what it means by his roots grasped new soil. He was grounded in a higher power. So despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me vestiges of my old prejudice. Here's the first mention of the word prejudice, which is a preconceived idea without due examination of the facts. And want to ask yourself, when you think about it, why is this word used so much in our big book? And here are all the places in which the word prejudice is used. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy, which is a dislike, hatred, or opposition. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. The score is a unit of 20. Okay, we got that. My friend suggested that what then seemed a novel idea. Oh my goodness. So novel means new and innovative, new and unusual and interesting way. And right here, right now, is where Ebby's message pivots from a religious one to a spiritual one. My friend suggested what then seemed like a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? Right? Totally different than a religious message which tells you that God is A, B, C, and D, and you better believe in this or you're going to hell. So we are pivoting from religious to spiritual at this time. And if you can cross-reference this on page 113 and pass it on, which talks where Ebby says it was really more of a spiritual message than it was a religious movement. There you go. All right. So that statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered for many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. All right. So we're talking about step 2 here, right? And we're also talking about growth, the first signs of spiritual growth, which there is an exercise and there are instructions on page 47. And it says here at the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth. So his mind is opening. He's considering new ideas. He's letting go of his old ideas. And we are having a moment of growth here. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. Thus, was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. At long last, I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes, and a new world came into view. We can cross-reference a couple of things here. Page 46, which is a promise. God does not make too hard of terms with those who seek him. That aligns here with when we want him enough, right? And remember the desperation of a drowning man. Unfortunately, alcoholics need to be either convinced of A, B, and C to have an open mind, or beaten by the disease in order to have the mind open. And see what happens at that moment. Self-surrender, an open mind to spiritual concepts, and willingness, right? The fundamentals. Scales of Pride and Prejudice, we can cross-reference page 58, the third paragraph, which says some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go. Absolutely. My old idea of God did not work, and I almost died behind that. Okay. The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness to have him with me, and he came. But soon, the sense of his presence had been blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly those within myself. And so it had been ever since. How blind I had been. Go to page 55. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. And it may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form of other, it is there. This aligns with this statement here, was that the great reality within is blotted out, obscured by calamity, pomp, and worship of other things, all within me, right? And the steps are a process of facing and removing those obstacles so that we can have an experience, we can make conscious contact, have an experience, an awakening of the great reality within that has always been there from the womb. We have just been oblivious to it because all of that stuff that the steps remove from us literally block us off and we are unaware. And for the alcoholic, that is an intolerable situation. We are the type of people that we must have some either connection with God or a spiritual experience. We must be tapped in and tuned in and have that free flowing, or we find it intolerable. And therefore, we seek the ease and comfort that comes or seems to come by taking a drink or a drug or whatever it is. So that is our mission, right? Is to remove everything that's blocking off. And when you look at the inventory, what is that? That's fear, resentment, the whole 9 yards, old ideas, prejudice. So at the hospital, I was separated from alcohol for the last time. So this is December 11th, 1934, Bill's last drink. Treatment seemed wise, where I show signs of delirium tremens. There, I humbly offered myself to God as they then understood him, to do with me as he would. I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing, that without him I was lost. I ruthlessly faced my sins, which is an archery term for errors. I faced my errors, my wrongdoings, and became willing to have my newfound friend take them away, root and branch. I have not had a drink since, right? Self-will failed it. Self-will failed. So, at the time when Bill did this, there was no formal Alcoholics Anonymous. There were no formal steps. This is the beginning of it. So Bill did this all in a very short period of time. Here we go. Here they are. So my schoolmate visited me. That's Ebby. And I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. Step 5, right? We made a list of people who I had hurt and whom I felt resentment. That's step 4 and step 8 kind of mixed in together. I expressed my entire willingness, step 9, to approach these individuals admitting my wrong. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to right all such matters to the utmost of my ability. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Later in the book, this is referred to the sixth sense, which we're going to talk about at length. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. Never was I to pray for myself, except as my request bore my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure. So these basically line up with the promises of step 10. Let's go to page 85, the second paragraph. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we carefully follow directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. And I might, that means that those obstacles are removed. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense, but we must go further, and that means more action. Top of page 87. Used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. Being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable that we're going to be inspired at all times. We might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration, and we've come to rely upon it. Yep. So my friend promised when these things were done, the steps, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. Remember page 72, which talks about our path. We have been trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator and to discover the obstacles in our path. All of the obstacles in our path are within. Sure, other people have done us totally wrong. There's no doubt about it. And that kind of harm actually is the gift that keeps on giving. And it's up to us to get it out, It is literally blocking us from having a connection with God. That I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. How many problems does that leave out? None. All of my problems. Belief in the power of God plus enough willingness is demonstrated only by action. Willingness is demonstrated only by action. Honesty, that's introspection, taking a look within, doing the columns. Humility, we're going to talk about humility in a second. To establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. So a requirement is a must. It is not a take what you want and leave the rest. Notice that the solution is not meeting centered. The sharpest tools in our toolbox are not meetings. Okay, humility is one of those really fun words where you can look it up in different dictionaries and it will always be different. So this is one of the fun journeys that I found when entering the Big Book study is I collected many definitions of humility over quite a few years before I decided on the one that I was going to use. So I challenge you to do the same thing. So simple, but not easy, right? We understand these concepts. They're simple. They don't require too much, but it's not easy. It's not easy because we have to face our prejudice. It's not easy because we have to look at our resentments, our sexual inventory, how we've harmed others, how our ego has failed us, right? That's the price we have to pay. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. I must, there's that word must again, turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. Wow. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals. But the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory, followed by such a peace and serenity I'd ever known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up, as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. All right, we have a lot of cross-referencing here. All right, back to the top. It says this meant the destruction of self-centeredness. Go to page 62, and you will see in the first real paragraph, selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our trouble. Great. So is it logical to say that unselfishness is the solution? Unselfish construction action for others, right? Also known as altruism. Now let's take a look at what it means to accept. On page 42, and I'm using a different book, so I may not, oh, I definitely don't have it highlighted. Basically the entire page of 42, but we're gonna read that and we're gonna study that when we get to page 42. So victor is the person who defeats an enemy or an opponent in battle, game, or other competition. There was a sense of victory. What did the victor defeat? Right? Well, our own self-centeredness, selfishness, self-centeredness. We are in battle, not in flesh and blood, but with our own thought forms. We are in battle with our own thought forms. Oh, here it is, page 42. The moment I made up my mind to go through with the process. So we aren't going to stop and read, pass it on. There's a very long version of these couple sentences of Bill Wilson's spiritual experience. It's quite powerful. I actually tear up every time I read it. So we're not gonna do that, but you could pause right now and go read in Pass It On page 120 at the 5th paragraph, all the way to the end of the chapter to hear the extended version of Bill Wilson's spiritual experience. So while I lay in the hospital, the thought came to me that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given to me. Oh, wait a minute. Where did this thought come from? He's a very self-centered man with only 5 days sober, right? We are seeing a different version of Bill Wilson, one who is thinking of other people, right? Page 20. Our very life depends on our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. Perhaps I could help some of them, and they in turn might work with others. Here, you are seeing the signs of somebody who's had a spiritual experience, somebody who's made a massive dent in their self-centeredness. My friend, Ebby Thatcher, had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others that he had worked with me. Notice it doesn't say, particularly was it imperative to attend 90 and 90, to attend meetings, right? No, it's of paramount importance to work with other alcoholics as he had worked with me. Page 89, first paragraph, or first sentence actually. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much as ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. So check your own experience. Faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic, and you can cross out the word alcoholic and put your name there. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink, and if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. So a couple of things here. There will be trials and low spots ahead, I can assure you. And what is the answer to that? To go help someone else. Radical, right? Radical. And it's not popular, let me tell you, in circles of AA, if people get to know me and they understand that I study the big book, they may come to me with their problems, and you know what I'm going to say? Go help someone else, which is a rather unpopular answer. What they really want is someone to listen and listen and listen and listen and listen and basically validate their feelings. Okay, I understand that there is some value to that, but we need to move above and beyond that and get into action. Get into action. And that is helping another person. So what is our response to a low spot? This is how you can start to, you see a couple, this is so power packed. As you are practicing discernment within the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, perhaps you're choosing a sponsor, perhaps you are pausing and you need someone to hear your fifth step. You might want to look for signs of this, right? How are they showing, are they demonstrating that they're looking for ways to be helpful to other people? What happens when they face a trial and a low spot? How are they responding to that, right? So here we go. Let's go to demonstrating on page 19, the first paragraph. None of us, so none of the first 100 men and women, makes a sole vocation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. We feel that an elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. All of us, the first 100 men and women, spend much of our spare time in the sort of effort which we are going to describe. That's the working with others. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all their time to the work. So that is the demonstration we're talking about here. And this is a promise. So for if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he would not survive. That's a promise. Okay, certain trials and low spots ahead. We can cross-reference this to page 35 on the third paragraph. Okay, we told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled and began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. And on each of these occasions, we ignored his phone calls. Oh, no, it doesn't say that. It says on each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed he was a real alcoholic in serious condition. Okay, so he failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others. My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. Sorry. But does that describe the people that you know in AA today? I'm sorry. It's not funny, but it does tickle me. It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time. I was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. He called that being not well when you're in self-pity and resentment. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Okay, wait a minute. No one taught me that when I came to the program. No, what they told me was call your sponsor and go to a meeting. Turns out if I would have been trained on some type of skill and how to work with other alcoholics, it probably would have had much better success. Many times I've gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I'd be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in the rep going. So do people ever go back to like the recovery homes or their treatment centers and work? Sometimes they do, like H&I panels, things like that. All right. Cross-reference page 90. Okay, well, it's the whole page, which I'm not going to take the time to read right now, but I encourage you to pause the video and go ahead and read page 90. And we're going to ask ourselves, what other measures have we tried when being plagued with ways of self-pity and resentment, or the desire or wanting to drink, right? What are the measures that we've tried? Have you tried making it a priority to work with other alcoholics, right? This is our design for living. All right, we're going to cross-reference page 28, the second paragraph. The distinguished American psychologist William James, in his book Varieties of Religious Experience, which is the only other book mentioned in the first 164 pages, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living creator with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. All right, on the first page of the doctor's opinion, cross-reference that, and depending on which edition of the big book, it will have a different Roman numeral. Okay, in the third paragraph of Dr. Silkworth's letter, it says, in the course of his third treatment, right, so that's Bill Wilson going to Charles B. Towns Hospital for the third time, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. And as a part of his rehabilitation, right, not at the end, but as a part of the rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. This has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. So what is the basis of the fellowship? It's working with others. What is the number one activity that can ensure immunity from drinking? Working with others. So we commence to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, of which it is a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I've seen hundreds of families set on their feet in a path that really goes somewhere, have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I have seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. In one Western city, which I think was Akron, and its environs, there are 1,000 of us and our families. We meet frequently. Why? Why do they meet frequently? To talk about their resentments and their fears and what they're pissed off about? No. So that the newcomer may find the fellowship that they seek. At these informal gatherings, one may see from 50 to 200 persons, and we are growing in numbers and power, right? So meetings are only mentioned twice in the big book, and that is on this page and page 159 on the third paragraph. Let's go over there real quick. 1, 2, 3. A year and 6 months later, these three had succeeded with 7 more. Seeing much of each other, scarce an evening passed that someone's home did not shelter a little gathering of men and women, happy in their release, and constantly thinking about how they may present their discovery to a newcomer, right? Didn't that just line up with what happened to Bill's thinking after 5 days of being sober? The mind starts switching into how you can present an opportunity to someone. How can we approach the newcomer? How can I give someone the opportunity that I was given? In addition to these casual get-togethers, it became customary to set apart one night a week for a meeting to be attended by anyone or everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. Aside from the fellowship and sociability, the prime object was to provide a time and place where new people might bring their problems. Alrighty then, so twice, meetings are mentioned in our book twice, and both times it is about the newcomer. Okay, I'm sorry, but that's radically different than what I was taught when I was 17 and I'm 51, right? That I was supposed to go to meetings, share what's on my mind, yada, yada, yada. No, we're going there to be of service. It's a place for us to be of service to someone else. There's nothing for me to get. There's only something for me to give. An alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. That just means when he's drunk, right? Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. And one poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. So that is Bill C. And here he is, a young Canadian alcoholic, former attorney, compulsive gambler, stayed at Bill's house nearly a year, and he committed suicide on October 1936 by putting his head in the gas stove. Before he did that, he had sold some of their clothes. Okay, you cannot get this by osmosis. This guy, Bill C., had a whole year right there with Bill Wilson, right there with that first strong group. It didn't sink in through his skin, right? He could not or would not see their way of life. And we know what the way of life is. And so, like, right now, when it talks about, growing along spiritual lines, that a lot of times what I lean on a sponsor for in these days is working with other alcoholics, right? And the various things that come up in that process. We do need support with that because you care about people, right? And you worry about them and things like that. So you do need the support. Okay, he could not or would not. Page 58, the first paragraph. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. So that's Bill C. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. Let's not worry about the ones that, let's not get too down on the ones that don't make it, that we do have fun. I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity, but just underneath there is deadly earnestness. Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us or we perish. So this is the start of the 24-hour of day, one day at a time mindset, which was to cultivate faith every day. And that is different than just don't drink one day at a time, right? Put the plug in the jug, don't drink one day at a time, and every year you get a chip and a cake. No, it's about each day faith working through us, right? And faith without works is dead. It's an action. Most of us feel we need look no further for utopia. We have it with us right here, right now. Each day, my friend's simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill towards men. If we have related to Bill's story, do I see my own story in it? Not just the outer details, but the inner disease. And for me, I never really related to Bill's story at all until I got the doom curve and I could just see the progression of alcoholism, taking away, the fact that Bill is a man and he was in the military and all this stuff. Like all of that was distracting me from seeing that this is my story because of the progression of alcoholism. So if I can see that, yes, I am on that doom curve, might I be willing to try the solution that worked for Bill Wilson? Okay, so we have finished Bill's story, and I just want to remind you to revisit page 47 and continue working on spiritual terms. Okay, the parking lot is open.
I don't have any questions today.
Okay,